Hello, everyone. I am Ade Taylor. I'm Head of Cyber Security Services for Rock Technologies. We are a managed IT services and cyber services, cyber security services. That's my job title. I should remember that, really. Cyber security services provider. Some of our customers are in the room. We work a lot with HE. It's lovely to see you. I wanted to comment. I'm going to talk about AI a little bit because it's mandatory. I've got an AI slide. I don't know if any of you saw the real-time translation going on when Jim was speaking. It obviously doesn't work with a Scottish accent, would be my comment. And I'm going to talk about the extremely difficult balance between collaboration and security, cybersecurity. It's particularly relevant, I think, to our HE customers because among all of the people we deal with, the level of collaboration and the types of collaboration which universities in particular, further education as well, but HE in particular do as part of your day-to-day operation is enormous, and it gives us a real cybersecurity challenge. I'll talk about that in a sec. So I am a tall man. I have grey hair. I wear glasses. I'm in my very early 50s. And today I'm wearing blue jeans and black shoes. Now, arriving at that description was a process. I asked my children, my grown-up children, how I should describe myself, and my partner, how she would describe me. I looked at the resultant word cloud and took out all the offensive words and the repeated use of the word nerd and geek and all the other stuff you would expect to see in there. And I arrived at the one I've just used, so hopefully that was descriptive enough of me. I'm not going to put an awful lot of statistics on the screen. Those of you that have seen any presentation about cybersecurity or listened to a vendor or provider of cybersecurity services over the last millennia will be extremely used to having big, scary numbers on screens. That one's reasonably interesting and the most interesting one to use, I think, for the purposes of today. 97% higher education establishments experienced an attack or a breach. Now, what's really interesting about that, and that's the highest in the industry, actually. It's the highest out of absolutely anyone. Everyone's up there, but 97% is right at the top. What's really interesting to me about that is it relates to another set of figures. I'm going to have another slide I'll show you in a minute. It's not necessarily that higher education is a bigger target than anyone else. As we'll see in a minute, you guys are much better at detecting stuff and noticing stuff than a lot of other people in the industry. You have your act together in a lot of areas in terms of cybersecurity. So it is probably, in fact, I know it is the case that particularly in enterprise, there are far more attacks than are noticed. And not even noticed, there are far more attacks than are reported on because it's a pain to analyze all those attacks and report on them. So I think actually what's happening there is, yes, you're a very attractive target. I'm going to see that in a second. But also you're much better at detecting and reporting those attacks. So it's high, but perhaps not a thing to panic about. And that figure's from the NCSE, which makes it slightly more reliable than something which comes from, no disrespect, there are lots of vendors here. We're a service supplier, service provider. It's quite a reliable figure. Okay, so what's attractive about HE if you're an attacker? Well, the answer is quite a lot, actually. Now, if you want those things down the right, and they are all incredibly attractive targets, you're only going to find them in one place, really, in campus environments, right? And what is the most likely campus environment? It's a university, right? And if you can, I know there are different networks, and student networks these days are not generally not on the university administrative network. That was the case when I first started working with universities, like everywhere. And I know there's some separation, there's some logical and physical separation, a lot of security measures in place. However, if you're an attacker and you see all of these things physically close to one another, and in some way there is a link between all of those things, then that's super attractive for you. There are a number of other reasons. There is a propensity still to use, in some, not all universities, that vast array of Class A and Class B IP addresses that you were all issued 35 years ago, that everyone's super jealous of. Those are difficult to disguise. They're a great target. They're a great prize if you can compromise those and start using them for bad things, because they tend not to be blocked in all the places that a lot of IP addresses that do nefarious things are blocked. They take longer to be blocked, and they're unblocked more easily. There's a lot of opportunity for identity exploitation. Identity is a theme which I will come to because it is probably the biggest theme in cybersecurity at the moment. And if you can get hold of the use of an ac.uk email address, for example, that's very prized, and those identities sell for quite a lot of money comparatively. Nothing super expensive in buying identities these days, but they're comparatively expensive. I borrowed one years ago to get a discount on an Apple Mac when I was working with a university, and that's probably not the most attractive thing about those email addresses, but it's a thing. Collaboration. It's back to collaboration. Some of the things universities do, higher education establishments in general do, are attractive for the wrong reasons to attackers and to threat actors. This has happened, actually, this just happens to be the one I picked on, but in my long and storied career with universities and research establishments linked to universities, this has happened several times. This is the one that was probably the most interesting, but it's happened several times. I was involved in some incident response. The university in question, UK University, was doing some research for an article that a national newspaper was writing, a broadsheet was writing, about Anonymous, and they were digging around into the ethics. They were trying to understand the ethics of the Anonymous hacking group. They were trying to understand a little bit about their hierarchy, where they got the money from. They were digging. The first article was published. There was going to be a series. And then I got a phone call from this particular customer saying they were compromised, they had an attack, their systems were all unreachable, remote learning wasn't working, everything was down. For all intents and purposes, looked like a cyber attack. So the IT guys were working on it, the managed IT service providers were in, we turned up, yes, it's a cyber attack. As we arrived on site, this email arrived in several mailboxes at the university, and in private mailboxes as well, and to our organisation. They know the association. They know who supports whom. They know who customers are. And that attack, and you can obviously see why, that statement, we notice you're interested in us, we're flattered you have our attention, right? That attack went on. We didn't fix it, right? You don't fix attacks like that. You mitigate them, you bypass them, you get services back up and running. You don't fix it, really, until they decide to stop. And that's if, yeah, honestly, and that's whether you pay them or they get bored. You know, they decide to stop doing that, and then you can get all your services back up and running. And there's kind of no point in chasing them all over the place. You know, we'll replace that service, they'll discover it, they'll take it down. They're a pain. You know, fortunately, they've kind of gone away for a bit now. So collaboration sometimes leads to more directly dangerous cybersecurity challenges than the more opaque challenges. I binged a picture. No one bings anything, actually. I didn't bing a picture. Since the ability to create pictures from text has arrived, I love it. They're all over my presentations. If you ever see another presentation I've done, there will be everywhere. It's fantastic. For someone without a creative bone in their body, this is brilliant. I can produce art. Let's say art. Sorry, Krista, our marketing director's in the room, so let's not say art, maybe. I have another apology to make to you, Krista. When I was testing this morning, I was standing at the back and I couldn't read any of my text, so I went through quickly and made the fonts bigger, so it will look rubbish. My apologies, and apologies to everyone else in the room. You might be able to see it, it just won't look great. That was when I kicked the power out of the AV system as well, which the guys had to spend half an hour sewing back out. So, if you ask, the most famous quote is from Professor Stafford, otherwise known as Staff, Eugene Stafford. He's a professor at Purdue University and has worked in cybersecurity and on cybersecurity projects forever. You may well know of him. He's very quotable, and he came up with the quote which a lot of people use now: the only secure system is powered off. Notice the text at the top there is rubbish, but what it should say is the only truly secure system is powered off, it's in a lead box, it's in a block of concrete, it's sealed and guarded by armed guards, and even then I'm not sure. This is ideal from a cybersecurity point of view. That's how I'd like all computers to be. That would be absolutely perfect for me if that's how IT services worked. This is pretty dystopian. I don't know if you've noticed. This is what Microsoft comes up with when you give it that prompt, which is a little bit concerning. It looks like 1984, and I'm not even sure where the computer is. I'm assuming somewhere in the background there. It doesn't really foster collaboration. If you have to build brick walls around your data, and that was typically the approach for cybersecurity for a long time, which was easy to do when no one was in the cloud and all of your data was in a room underneath your feet, literally in most cases. It was easy to do. You could control who had access really simply. It doesn't work anymore, right, for obvious reasons. The methods employed when universities are attacked, the methods of compromise, for me are really quite interesting because they're quite old school. I quite like seeing these knocking around because they were the things that everyone used at the start of my career, so it makes me feel not quite as old as I am. Impersonation is really interesting. We talked about that a little bit. Identity is crucial. Identity theft these days is crucial. University identities are really hot property, actually. And so this whole attack vector, this whole attack vector is much more prevalent, impersonation and stealing identities online and getting access to AC UK emails or whatever they are. It's much more prevalent amongst further and higher education than it is among anybody else. Your identities online are worth more than anybody else's, which is really surprising because if you think about identity theft in a cybersecurity terms, you tend to think about people trying to get hold of the CEO's credentials or the finance director's credentials, and we hear about those stories a lot where somebody's been tricked into sending 100 grand to somewhere, right? Actually, it's HE which is the most prevalent target, and I'm not entirely sure that is completely understood by most of the cybersecurity industry. When I started to do the research for this presentation, I have to admit I didn't expect that to be right up there. We can talk about that. I'm here all day, by the way. I'm downstairs as well for the next couple of days, so we can talk about that in as much length as you want later. And then denial of service. Again, very few people get hit by denial of service anymore. It used to be the thing. Denial of service was the thing. It was easy to do. Hackers got great results from it. I'm using hacker as it's a pejorative term, I realise that. I'll use it for shorthand. It was easy to do. They could coordinate it between themselves. There was software that they had to run. They didn't have to do anything, right? They gave it a target IP address or just ran it on their machine. Someone else coordinated it via IRC, botnet, whatever, and off it went. So it's easy to do. It doesn't happen anymore. We don't see it in enterprise anymore. And one of the reasons is that their resources are in the cloud, right? That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that they pay a lot of money to companies that help them mitigate those denials of service, and their IP addresses and domain names are not as obvious as they used to be. So universities still have this issue, and I think this is why it is, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, right? There is still a lot of interesting infrastructure on site at universities where denial of access to those services would be interesting from a a hacker's ransom point of view, right? Or just messing around point of view. There's a lot of bandwidth, there's a lot of visible IP addresses, there's a big target to go after for denial of service. And I think that's why it exists. But those figures are stark, you know, it literally happens to nobody else now. You do well. This is a bit of an eye test, this slide. The point about this is, in terms of cybersecurity maturity, on the flip side of what I was just talking about, HE maturity is right up there. You are more mature in terms of the controls that you have in place to manage cybersecurity than anybody else, like literally anyone else in the industry. You probably can't see from there, but this is from NCSC again. The black line there, with all the 100% and the 94%, that's HE. I mean, HE just knocks, careful of my phrasing, cocked hat, that's what it does. Knocks enterprise in particular into a cocked hat in terms of the time, effort, the maintenance of those controls, physical, technical, logical, that you process that you do, right? You're in a really good place, which again is kind of, I'm not sure that's entirely understood in people that provide services purely for corporate and enterprise. I kind of knew that, but I think it's an interesting figure to put up. Management support is absolutely crucial. If you're going to put these things in place, going to put controls, technical, process, physical, if they're going to be in place and maintained, you have to have senior management support. You guys have it. I found lots of quotes like this, but essentially it's saying, absolutely, management get it. This bottom one says I have the right understanding, some having specialist backgrounds too. There's investment in time, money, people in making sure that HE maintains those controls. Doesn't happen in corporate. It's one of the biggest problems in private sectors, one of the biggest problems. It's tick box, it's signed off, and then it's not looked after because it doesn't have somebody on the board, generally, I'm generalizing, doesn't have somebody on the board that makes it their job to look after that stuff. It's supposed to be somebody's job, but things get in the way. You about to show me that 5-minute sign? Oh, yeah? 1 minute. Right, I'm just about to run out of time. I want to get to some more interesting stuff about collaboration, so I'm going to do that. Just briefly before I get there. Cloud resources, 512% up in terms of attack and compromise. The reason for that is that hackers have become able to understand how to compromise and use the cloud. What they're interested in is using the cloud. So being in the cloud now is really dangerous from a cybersecurity point of view, more dangerous than it has been since its inception. What they want to do is steal your processing, make some malware with it, do some machine learning, run a porn site, use you for command, whatever, they'll steal your resources. The reason they know how to do it now, Gen AI. So you compromise someone's identity, you log into their Amazon, whatever it is, administration panel, you come across something you don't know how to do. The same applies for operational technology, by the way, and old stuff that nobody knows how to work. You paste what you see on the screen into Gen AI, you ask it what you should do to run up a resource or to compromise whatever it is, and it tells you. You know, we've done it, we've tested it, it tells you. I've got this screen, I want to disable these resources, what do I do? And ChatGPT will say, I'll just type this in and that in, and away you go. So you no longer have to be an expert, everyone can do this stuff now. Your most important collaborators are your users. In terms of cybersecurity, we always used to refer to them as insider threat, which makes it sound like everybody's trying to steal corporate data and sell it. I much prefer the phrase insider risk now. Identity comes into play here right now as well, because what hackers are after now is those people's identities. That's what they're after. They don't particularly want to sell them malware, send them malware. They don't particularly want to phish them. They want their identity. The point I would make about phishing is the training that everybody does every 6 months or whatever it is, every organization, and has done for years. I used to think that was useless in the last few years because it doesn't move the needle, to use another really annoying phrase. Phishing attacks are not really coming down. You know, and everyone has had the training, and it's been going on for years and years. It's a big industry, so my apologies if there are any people from the fish training industry in the room. And it's still valid, by the way. It's still a valid thing to do. However, the point is, I was at a Gartner conference a couple of years ago. Somebody really interesting stood up and talked about this. They did a survey of like several thousand people. All of the users knew what they shouldn't do with phishing emails. They understood it. It's not hard, right? They run IT at home. They understand cybersecurity. Everyone gets it. Everyone understands about dangerous emails from people you don't know with links you don't understand. Everyone gets it. So they know what they shouldn't do. And they've been through the IT training and they tick the boxes, but they don't care. They still do it. And they do it for various different reasons. Some people do it, believe it or not, because they're curious and the email says an interesting thing. And, you know, we still see quite a lot of that. And they assume now that their IT systems will protect them if it's a bad thing. So if it's, you know, something about, I was going to say the name of a famous celebrity, but I can't think of anyone. If it's, you know, a holiday or something, whatever it is, people will still open it even though they know they shouldn't. And what can you do with that, right? And the other thing is they have to do their job. So, you know, if you have to bypass your IT policies by using Dropbox when you're not supposed to, by using a USB key when you're not supposed to, whatever it is, people do it. And they admit to it now. They freely admit to it. And the answer is, why do you do it? And the answer is, well, because I've got to get this load of files to Dave in accounts, and there's no way internally for me to do it. And they will find a way. Everyone is IT savvy these days, most people, you know, they'll find a way to do it. Passwords, old hat, let's not use those. Passwordless is absolutely the way it's going. A prompt on a secure device that knows you, it's biometric. I'm talking about a phone, basically, right? Let's face it, it knows who you are. It's biometrically authenticated. You get a prompt. You say, yes, I'm going to log. It's much more secure than it sounds. When I first saw it, I thought, that doesn't seem secure at all. Much more secure than passwords. It's the way it's going. It's also frictionless, which is the most important thing when dealing with users. It can't get in their way. We have to be an enabler in security. We can't be in their way. Is that a 2-minute? Did I miss the 5-minute one entirely? I did, didn't I?
I took it, but you've taken it.
Sorry, yeah. I always take far too long, so I time this and then I always go far too long. Apologies. Let's talk about third parties. I think the last thing I'll talk about is third parties. This is really important. And we talked a little bit, sorry, the guys down here, sorry, I can't remember names, my apologies. You talked about accreditations, right, in relation to greenwashing. In IT, and particularly in security, I'm very cynical about accreditation. So when you're selecting and assessing the validity, the level of trust that you're going to have with a third-party organization, we've all filled in questionnaires, we've all exchanged our ISO 27001 certificates, Cyber Essentials, great, that's fantastic. Several things occur to me there. One, I've been through several ISO 27001 audits in earlier jobs, and they're self-certifying. The scope is down to you. You can show the auditors what you want to show them. I'm not saying everyone does that, but the scope is defined by the customer, right? I mean, you get inspected on what you want to get inspected on. That's problem one, and that applies to a lot of other things. Problem two, what happens between audits? How do you know how that third party is behaving as soon as they get a certificate and move on? You don't. I mean, it's just, nobody wants to do this stuff badly, but business imperatives get in the way, and you know, you can't maintain certain levels of adherence forever. Every single time something happens, you can't go back to that level of adherence that you said you would to on the audit, right? So the only way to fix this is to take responsibility for your data, share what you need to collaborate on, share, but don't share the data. Don't give anything that you can't remove access to. do it under your terms. So if that means taking a copy of that data and putting it somewhere secure where you have full control over it, not distributed all over the place with lots of legacy permissions associated with it, do that. It's a project, right? Collaborating with people from a cybersecurity point of view is a project. We see an awful lot of company A is now our partner, they need to see data set B, we'll set them up a user account and a VPN, and off they go. You know, they now have access to that, it's great, we're collaborating. No one will ever turn that VPN off when that collaborative project stops, no one. No one will remove the access to that data when that collaborative project stops. It's, there's a word for it that I can't remember, but it's a huge problem, right? So it's your data, you have to make sure that you have protected it in the way that you want it protected and that you can turn off access to it whenever you want, and that it's the right data. You know where it is, you went out and found it, you went out to find it, it's not in 4 different places in a cloud, and if it is, and it's really high risk for you, move it. Put it somewhere, copy it somewhere where you can share it without the level of risk that you're comfortable with. And it can't be, have I put this phrase somewhere? No. It can't be critical and indefensible at the same time. That is the last point I would make because the stop sign's in front of me. If you identify some data as super critical, important to your business, you can't lose it, reputationally, technically, whatever it is, you cannot defend it, then you can't share it. Simple as that. You either have to make it less critical or spend the money on defense, otherwise you can't share it. That project that relies on that data cannot happen. And I've run out of time, so apologies for that. Are there any do have some time for some questions, though, if anybody has any questions. I realise I've talked a lot in a short time. Hi.
Morning, I'm
Hello.
Foster Morning, everyone. Thanks for that really interesting presentation. I'm Andrew Foster from North.
Hi, Andrew.
I've worked for a number of different organisations over the years, and I agree with you on the phishing challenge. The link between training, knowledge, and logic is very, very slim.
Yeah.
Are there any psychological approaches to how our employees engage with threats such as phishing? And are there any things away from pure training and learning that cultures of organisations can learn from?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I don't sell product. So you can Google what I'm about to say and you'll find various people that sell stuff like this, right? But it's new, it's a new thing. So using, of course, AI, all those .ai domains must be making Anguilla an absolute fortune. I didn't even know Anguilla was a place, by the way, anyway. AI is powering this whole, they don't call it nudge theory, but it's kind of inline dynamic associated with everything you do, integrated with IT. Training. It's not even training, it's prompting, right? So you fix the problem with technology. It becomes our responsibility again. And the way it works, I've seen a few of these, by the way. As a concept, the way it works is really cool. So you're typing away in an email or in Teams or in Slack or in an SMS or in WhatsApp, whatever it is, and it's like a modern version of Clippy, for those of you who remember that, right? It says, you're typing a credit card number. You sure you should do that? Because it's against your policy, and you can put your own policies in it really easily, or it's against the law, or it's, whatever it is. It's much more sophisticated than that, as you can imagine. I've just described it in a fairly simplistic way. But it's technology supporting user behavior rather than all the time saying, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do that. Of course, you can program it to say you're not allowed to do it, but what most people are doing is they're using it to nudge users, to say, not sure that's a good idea, your company provides a different way for you to do that. So would you like me to show you how to do that instead? So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's a better approach, I think. And there are several vendors, so I'm sure if you Google, they'll come up with solutions.